Ever since the morning of August 24th in 79 AD, when Mount Vesuvius buried the Roman city of Pompeii under 20 feet of ash, volcanoes entered the pages of human history as destroyers, as cauldrons of chaos, reeking of hell's own brimstone. Like pustules ready to burst, volcanoes are a fiery rash on the Earth's crust. They erupt when it's least expected. They're capricious, often deadly, and we humans stand helpless before them. In the volcano-built national parks and monuments of the United States, Yellowstone in Wyoming, Crater Lake in Oregon, Mount St. Helens in Washington, Katmai in Alaska, lava beds in California, and Volcanoes National Park, home of Pele, legendary fire goddess of Hawaii. We can discover that volcanic eruptions are more than juggernauts that menace and mesmerize. They are the upwelling builders of our planet. They are the makers of land, of worlds, and they offer us a rare glimpse into the process of creation. Just what is a volcano? A god? A devil? Or both? Volcanoes. To humankind, they are enveloped in an aura that can only be described as supernatural. They're devil mountains and holy mountains. Lift up your eyes on high and see who created these. By their beauty and radiance, these holy mountains, magic mountains, draw humans like moths to a flame, and sometimes consume them. To some, they're upthrusts of hell. To others, abodes of the gods and spirits. Volcanoes are something else to scientists. Like a tree's rings, they're a record of growth, of the Earth's growing pains, and proof that our planet is still spunky, still kicking. If our Earth were an egg, its yolk would be its solid core, which is about the size of our moon. Then there's a mantle, some of which is molten. We live on the outer crust, which is several miles thick. Unlike the shell containing the egg, the Earth's crust isn't stationary. It moves and overlaps and buckles. Pieces of it, called plates, grind against each other. In the intense heat below, gas and steam force magma, molten rock, through escape routes in the Earth's crust. When magma wants out, it gets out. Thus, volcanoes are born. Some explode with hurricane force in torrents of ash and pumice. Some erupt with thick, creamy folds of molten lava. There are three common types of volcanoes. Cinder cone volcanoes, such as this one at Mount Lassen in California, are explosive and spew hot rock and ash that builds up steeply around the vent. Shield volcanoes can be deceptive. Mauna Loa in Hawaii may be mistaken for a gently sloping mountain of no volcanic character. It's built of successive layers of lava flowing long distances and is rarely explosive. A composite volcano, such as Mount Rainier in Washington, is built of lava flows and explosive eruptions of cinder and ash, much like a multi-layered cake. This kind of volcano combines features of the cinder cone and shield volcano. America is one of the Earth's great volcanic hotspots. Rumblings, earthquakes, eruptions, particularly the American West. California alone has at least 66 volcanoes. Some of the most violent eruptions in the world occur in Alaska. And Hawaii experiences almost continuous eruptions. Stark, eerie, a lunar landscape on our own familiar Earth. An area of 83 square miles suffocated by iron-hard lava. Visitors here feel like they're walking on the moon. Thousands of years ago, our Earth sprung a slow leak. It gurgled and rippled, plopped and slopped over the countryside. Then fire fountains shot up plumes of molten rock, which in time set like pastry dough. This confirms our early notions about volcanic activity. Volcanic activity is an invitation to inactivity, to death. It comes from the other side of life, from hell maybe, as our ancestors believed. This chain of cones is one of the most perfect formations of this type in the world. Volcanoes build two kinds of cones, both found here in Craters of the Moon National Monument in Idaho. High, heaped-up cinder cones like this one. Those built of blobs sputtering out of vents called spatter cones. And bizarre formations which grew out of a slow ooze. The devil holds a lease on some of these clinkers. This chaotic plot is Devil's Orchard. This place has a strange, bleak beauty about it. It does little to dispel one's notion of volcanoes as harbingers of destruction, of death. Yellowstone in Wyoming was America's and the world's first national park. This is the way we usually see Yellowstone. But when we really explore Yellowstone, not only what's above the ground, but what's below it, we're witness to the primal forces that built this planet. Some 3 million years ago, an uplift of Earth roofed over the heart of the area. Then, 600,000 years ago, there was an explosion of unimaginable force. In this eruption, enough magma was ejected to pile up 7 mountains, each 10,000 feet high. As the magma chambers emptied, the uplifted Earth collapsed inward, creating Yellowstone's cauldron, among the largest in the world. Volcanic forces lie cramped beneath the park, waiting to be unleashed. Once, Our whole newborn planet Earth was like this, some billion years ago. Hot, steaming hot, and stinking of sulfur. Our whole planet. The dead of winter. These bison want to keep warm, so they forage where the earth is warmed from below by volcanic simmering. Yellowstone gurgles with the greatest concentration of geothermal features in the world. There's enough heat radiating up through the park's surface to melt 1 million tons of ice a day. Snow and rain seep into the orifices of the Earth's underground. These waters re-emerge as steaming fumaroles, or as hot springs, or if pockets of subterranean steam create enough pressure, as geysers. Early explorers, trappers, Indian guides saw Yellowstone differently from the way we do. They referred to it as the place where hell bubbled up. But to us, Yellowstone turns back the pages of geologic time to a portrait of our volcanic Earth in its hot, restless youth. The vast Pacific. Its verges, the hottest volcanic regions on Earth. This is the lethal ring of fire, a circle of fierce volcanoes, stretching from the tip of South America, up Central America, and North America, then arching at Alaska, glancing aside Asia, and settling to rest south of New Zealand. A 25,000-mile ring of fire seething beneath our planet's skin. In Japan, there are ring volcanoes that are worshipped. In California, an awe-inspiring member of this volcanic circle is the object of occult rituals and is said to shelter refugees from the lost continent of Atlantis. Shasta and nearby Mount Lassen guard the southern flank of the United States share of the fire ring. That range of West Coast mountains called the Cascades. The West Coast is ever-changing. Its undergirding is the Earth's crust beneath the Pacific Ocean, grinding against the crust supporting the North American continent. The three-state Cascade territory of Washington, Oregon, and California boasts 4 U.S. national parks, 3 U.S. national monuments, and several U.S. national forests and recreational sites. The range itself is spiked by 17 blockbuster volcanoes. Mount Baker in Washington is the most northerly of the U.S. Cascades. It shares a wilderness with North Cascades National Park. Baker is coldly north, always swathed in a white blanket because this mountain gets 62 feet of snow a year. Snow. 62 feet of it. But the mountain is only hibernating under this blanket. Underneath, it's a fiery cauldron. Only Only a century ago, this land was largely unexplored. Then it was known simply as Oregon country. Now we call it the Pacific Northwest. Much is as it once was. The pounding of the surf on its coastline, herds of wild elk, silent rainforests. But today there are tidy farms and vineyards, some of the world's tallest timber, and major cities. This is Seattle, premier city of the Pacific Northwest. One can hardly stroll through it without getting the feeling that Rainier is watching. The name the Native Americans had given the mountain was Tahoma. It means the mountain that was God. Though Rainier is a dormant volcano, it isn't extinct. Mount Rainier last erupted in the mid-1800s. Almost all of the Cascade's 17 volcanoes have stirred in the past 300 years. Only Mount Jefferson and Mount Thielsen in Oregon are considered extinct. Like Rainier, the last time Mount Hood erupted was in the 1800s. Now it is quiet. And just a glance to the east from any point in Portland, Oregon. A familiar facet of the Portland good life is neighboring Mount Hood National Forest. The mountain rises out of stalwart forests of evergreens, with the summit sheathed by glaciers, 11 of them, so that even in summer, snowfields never melt. To Portlanders, Mount Hood is family, and every so often it's time to renew your kinship with the mountain. Here we frolic. Like all volcanoes, Mount Hood draws us to itself, fills us with vigor, renews us. We warm ourselves at its hearth. But we forget that this mountain's heart is molten rock reaching to the Earth's core. We forget the binges, the incredible power. We ignore the great warnings of the past, branded onto the history of humankind, until we ourselves smell the fire. More climbers climb Hood than any other volcano in the world, except for Mount Hood's cousin volcano, one ocean removed, Mount Fuji in Japan. But if the climbers and hikers look closely, they may find that they're trampling over traces of their mountain's last eruption. Though these mountains look like glistening white angels in repose, they've got fire in their heart. Today, it's peaceful. But in 1914, when World War I exploded in Europe, these highlands of northeastern California felt an explosion of a different sort. Eons past, an ancient mother volcano called Tahoma reigned over this countryside. During the Ice Age, she went to pieces. But before her final eroding, she vented a child that we know as Lassen Peak. Lassen is a strapping North American in the global Ring of Fire. Lassen is also one of the biggest plug dome volcanoes in the world. 1914. As June moved toward the summer solstice, all was at peace. Then, as though echoing the war brewing in Europe, the mountain rumbled. This was startling. The volcano was presumed to be dead. On June 14th at 9:43 a.m., a local man named B.F. Loomis was ready with his box camera. Now, the mountain blew. And the mountain kept blowing into the year 1915. The eruptions got the whole nation talking about Lassen. In August of the next year, 1916, President Woodrow Wilson signed a bill creating Lassen Volcanic National Park. But this mountain didn't simmer down until the year that America got into the war. 1917. Today, you can climb the peak that had fulminated for those 3 long years and gaze out over the devastated area, where through the decades, life is returning. Yet there's still bubbling and boiling and the smell of sulfur to remind us that every slope, every ravine, every rock and pebble in this national park came from a volcano erupting hell. In the year 1980, Mount St. Helens in southwestern Washington looked like this. In the lakes and rivers lapping at its foot, heaven had created a masterpiece. This mountain challenged climbers and the imagination. The Indian people had great respect for the mountain's power. Some called it Luwit, the keeper of the fire. The lake that was the mountain's mirror became known as Spirit Lake. "83-year-old Harry Truman was one of the lodge owners at Spirit Lake. Unlike the others, Harry was a year-round resident. The legendary past was forgotten, the spirits of Spirit Lake ignored. Mount St. Helens glittered as a sportsman's getaway. Then, on March 20th, 1980, seismographs at the earthquake watches of the Pacific Northwest got the jitters. A week later, after a 123-year sleep, the mountain woke up. Its clean, smooth peak swathed in snow was rent. Now gaped a soot-black crater 250 feet wide. The mountain's north began to crack, to slump. More steam, more spewing ash. Then a bulge, like a turgid boil, began swelling on the volcano's north flank. Every day it was swollen 5 feet more. Gawkers, volcano watchers, descended from over the states and provinces of North America, from Germany and Switzerland, from as far as Israel. Mount St. Helens was news. Brave newsmen edged to the crater's rim. A sleeping beauty of a volcano was waking up. Scientists swarmed over it, making it the most studied volcano in North America. People were primed for fireworks. Some even climbed to the teetering edge of the action. They simply did not grasp the danger. Between April's end and May's beginning, the bulge had swelled to 320 feet in height, a half-mile in width, and a whole mile in length. The governor designated a restricted zone 5 miles around the peak to keep back the volcano watchers. "I've got a piece of the rock," was the protest. 35 Spirit Lake property owners demanded access. But peace prevailed that Saturday. A law enforcement patrol escorted those frustrated property owners to Spirit Lake, where they could collect their belongings. The next day was Sunday, May 18th. To gather anything they'd left behind, the homeowners were to return to Spirit Lake at 10 in the morning. But at 8:32 a.m., the birds stopped singing. A quake collapses the bulging north flank. Gigantic blocks crash downward in the largest avalanche in recorded history. Pent-up pressure found release in a tremendous explosion, blasting out of the mountain at 220 miles an hour and reaching a velocity of miles per hour 670. The explosion's fury was 27,000 times greater than that of the atom bomb that fell on Hiroshima in World War II. A pillar of ash shot 72,000 feet into the air and toppled onto Oregon, Idaho, and Montana. Hurricane winds felled 230 square miles of trees. For 19 miles, the blast seared. Spirit Lake was dammed, its banks denuded. Old Harry Truman, who refused to evacuate, lay buried under 300 feet of mud flow. Clogged rivers went wild. Hundreds of thousands of fish died, some in waters heated to 100 degrees Fahrenheit. In the words of the prophet Isaiah, "I will lay waste to mountains and hills, and dry up all the herbage. I will turn rivers into islands." People, animals, weltered in blizzards of ash and pumice. They came to call this day Ash Sunday. 540 million tons of ash poured down on the three-state area. We grope as if we had no eyes. We stumble at noonday, as in the night. With the air veiled with soot, it was darkness at noon in Yakima, Washington. Sheltering forest that had taken years and years to grow was no more. And the death toll in wildlife was high. Elk, deer, bears, mountain goats, and mountain lions. "57 human beings perished. Search and rescue teams braved mud and possible eruptions in quest of survivors. This solitary figure is also part of a search team. His search and that of his colleagues is still going on. These are scientists. Mount St. Helens offers rare opportunities for study, and now, because of what has been learned, we are able to predict eruptions of this type the world over. Volcanoes cannot be controlled, cannot be programmed. We can only stand in awe and try to understand them. Today, this great laboratory of volcanism is one of the most dynamic of America's national parks and monuments. After the great eruption of 1980, this land seemed devoid of life. A volcanic desert. To the surprise of scientists, small critters, gophers, frogs, and plants survived, protected under the likes of snowbanks and clumps of snow. Pollywogs appeared. Wind-blown seeds started to take root and sprouted foliage. Lupin, Pearly everlasting, fireweed made comebacks. Lone shoots of the alder began growing again. New green offered a homeland for wildlife, and the birds of the air returned. The mountain is renewing itself. After having blown away its summit, a dome of oozing magma is growing in its crater. A peak may rise again. Volcanoes do not destroy the land, they transform it. Their thunderous blasts are fanfares heralding new life. Once again, Mount St. Helens becomes a masterpiece of creation. After the turmoil of Mount St. Helens, dawn over these waters offers long-awaited peace. Serenity. The warm siennas and umbers of southern Oregon daub the setting of this sapphire body of water. It was a lake of blue to the Native Americans, one of the deepest lakes on Earth, and one that drenches the spirit with peace. It wasn't always that way. Where the lake now lies, there once stood a majestic mountain called Mazama. Mazama was ever growing from the inside. As with all volcanic mountains, molten rock and gases, magma, were continuously rising up through the mountain's conduit and erupting as lava. Mazama grew in an area of older volcanoes, such as Mount Thielsen, which can be seen from the park today. The trapped magma built up pressure, great pressure. Then, Mazama blew. That was almost 7,700 years ago. The eruption was 40 times bigger than Mount St. Helens' biggest. Ash and dust fell as far as 600 miles away. A legend of the Native Americans attributes this Holocaust to a terrible fight between Skell, chief of the world above, of air and light, and Lau, chief of the world below, a place of terror. Mazama blew part of itself away. What remained was weakened and collapsed. 5,000 feet of the mountain was destroyed, leaving a vast rocky emptiness. Over the centuries, this emptiness, this caldera, was filled by falling rain and melting snows. An emptiness filled. A cinder cone called Wizard Island gently reminds us of the lake's turbulent past. Purity, clarity. Crater Lake is one of the clearest bodies of water on Earth. This national park has much to offer: recreation and inspiration. There are visitors who come here for what might be called spiritual renewal, as though these waters can open the eyes to our oneness with all life. Before the coming of Columbus and after, volcanoes lived in the lore of the Indian peoples, Native Americans. To them, volcanoes were sometimes sacred and sometimes evil. They put this mountain to good use. Wyoming is where this bizarre-looking peak rises almost 1,300 feet above the bed of the Belle Fourche River. It was the first national monument to be established in the United States. Geologists know that it's volcanic. 60 million years ago, molten lava thrust upwards through the earth and in cooling, fractured into columns. When the white man began encroaching on their territory, the Indians of the Black Hills told the whites that this tortured neck of lava belonged to the devil. Thus, the Indians held off the white man a little longer. Here at Newberry Crater in Oregon, cooling lava had piled up on high, steep mounds of obsidian. They've been called curtains of glass. Of this obsidian, Native Americans snapped deadly arrowheads and razor-sharp knives. Prehistoric Indians of Arizona farmed this land. It's part of the San Francisco volcanic field. It's the colors that gave this place its name, Sunset Crater. From this crater about 1,000 years ago, molten lava began flowing, and ash covered over the parched, low-yield fields of those prehistoric farmers. The lava cooled. Those prehistoric Indians who'd lost their fields and pit houses to ash straggled back. Here, they made a discovery. Things grew better. Things grew as never before. Squash, corn, beans. Because volcanic ash blanketing their fields held moisture from rain, from snowmelt. One of the last acts in the drama of the dwindling Native Americans was played out on a volcanic stage. This vast expanse of hardened lava, called by the tribes the land of burnt-out fires. Within sight of the majestic volcano Mount Shasta, where Northern California blurs into the state of Oregon, there's a vast spill, one of the largest volcanic formations in the Cascade Mountains from the side of Medicine Lake volcano. Lava has spewed for over 1 million years. Some of it cooled as a cindery fortress. Bastions, trenches. In one of the strangest battlefields in America's long-running war to win the West. The Modocs were a scrappy little tribe, and now they were facing extinction. There were only 250 of them left. So when the U.S. government forced them onto a reservation with their arch-enemies, the Klamaths, they fought. A wily fellow called Captain Jack was their war chief. Jack defied the government. He and a motley band of Modoc braves, Sconchin John, Scarface Charlie, Hooka Jim, Shack Nasty Jim, so called because of his mother's terrible housekeeping, Steamboat Frank, About 50 fighting men, plus their women and children, holed up in the lava beds on the south shore of Tule Lake and prepared to take on a U.S. Army detachment of 1,000 soldiers who were coming to smoke them out. The grossly outnumbered Modocs laid low. Warriors, women, youngsters, old folks, dogs. The site of the U.S. Army camp. It stood less than 2 miles from the Modocs' lava stronghold. Here the soldiers drilled. Here they bragged about killing Indians. On the morning of November 29, 1872, they got their chance. They were ordered to flush the enemy from his stronghold. In the beginning, morale was high during the march over the lava. "Tomorrow we'll have Modoc steak for breakfast," they boasted. But soon, the terrain proved torturous. They argued over who would take the most Indian scalps. The lava was crippling them. Then they were driven off, turned around. 100 ragged Indians had routed a formidable military force. But in this encounter, the Modocs weren't the main thrust. The enemy was lava. Lava that shredded boots and flesh. This torturous lava. The U.S. Army changed its tactics. General Canby came with a peace commission to hold talks with Captain Jack under a flag of truce. Captain Jack kept headquarters here in a lava cave. It was here that Jack and his cohorts debated Canby's proposition. They didn't trust the peace commission. A hot-headed faction came up with a plan. Kill the peace commissioners, wipe them out, kill their leaders, and the soldiers would go home. Captain Jack stood up against the plan. He was outvoted. When he persisted in opposing it, the hotheads draped a squaw's blanket around him and called him a woman, a white-faced squaw. Humiliated, Captain Jack gave in. April 11, 1873. They met on the grass-covered lava, General Canby and Captain Jack. A tent was set up in case of rain. Then, shortly after the hour of noon, misfire. The pistol was aimed at Canby's head. Jack fired again. Canby fell backward, dead. General Canby, United States Army, murdered here by Modocs, April 11, 1873. The government abandoned all hopes for a settlement. Now, the Modoc War became a war of extermination. For almost 5 months, Captain Jack's ragtail band and their lava fortifications held off an army 20 times its size. Now it was the Modocs who were overly confident. And the U.S. Army was learning from them, learning to use the lava beds to their advantage. One strategy was to cut off the Modocs' access to food and to water. The lava fields became a trap. The Modocs fell to quarreling. Hungry, thirsty, tired, they were forced to abandon their lava stronghold, only to find themselves caught in the open, where they were hunted down. On June 1st, 1873, exhausted, Captain Jack gave himself up because, as he said, his legs gave out. The following October at Fort Klamath in Oregon, he was hanged, along with Scontian John, Boston Charlie, and Black Jim. Thus ended the Modoc Indian War, man for man the most expensive Indian war ever fought by the United States. The only one fought on a lava field. The Modocs were beaten. Captain Jack had foreseen their fate when he said, "Once my people were like the sand along the shore. Now I call to them, and only the wind answers." America's share of the fabled Ring of Fire reaches far north, bending through Alaska's awesome wilderness. The Alaska Peninsula. A 1,600-mile stretch of volcanoes which burst with 1, 2, up to 3 eruptions every year. Hundreds of miles of sparkling lakes and mountain peaks glassed in glaciers. Bald eagles hunt here, and so do bears, particularly brown bears. It's a place for fishing, rainbow trout, salmon. This is a place for adventure. It's no wonder that despite its remoteness, there are thousands who visit Katmai National Park every year. Many come as sightseers. Then, there are the truly brave ones who come to discover themselves, a monument to the building of planet Earth, the site of the most violent volcanic explosion in the last 100 years on the North American continent. 1912. A horrendous eruption of the Novarupta volcano. The mighty blast is heard in Juneau, 750 miles away. The city of Kodiak is paralyzed under a foot of ash. The water supply is threatened. Gardens suffocated, roofs cave in under the ash. Terrified townsfolk swarm onto boats in the harbor. Here, in what is now Katmai National Park, a lush valley was turned into 40 square miles of surrealistic landscape. For at the head of this valley, Novarupta volcano was born. It's been named the Valley of the 10,000 Smokes for the numerous steaming fumaroles discovered at Katmai Pass. Today, they've subsided. There's a moodiness about this place, a feeling of menace, because brooding at the valley's head hunch 4 volcanoes hemmed in by glaciers. Some of them want to break out, erupt. One day, they will. The Valley of the 10,000 Smokes is a monument, a recent monument, to the great volcanic forces that are molding the Alaska Peninsula. But it is in Hawaii where one can discover, dramatically, the volcanic underpinnings of this planet. The Hawaiian Islands are smack mid-Pacific, unrelated to any other landmass. At present, there are 8 of them, with more on the way. The Earth's crust at the floor of this ocean is referred to as the Pacific Plate. It's moving toward Asia at a speed of 3 inches a year. In mid-ocean, it passes over a hot spot. That's the term volcanists use, in the Earth's mantle some 60 miles down. Like a slow conveyor belt passing over a burner, percolated matter piles up. In this way, over the past 40 million years, mountains have grown. Some of them have grown big enough to rise above the water. What we call the Hawaiian Islands are the tops of such mountains, rising from the ocean's floor. As the plate drifts to the northwest, each island volcano drifts from its place over the hotspot and cools off. It's burnt out. Now the Hawaiian archipelago is expecting again. Loihi Seamount is a volcano that's still 3,182 feet below sea level. But it's growing into islandhood. We can expect it to be out of the water within the next 10,000 years. so have grown, are growing, the 8 large Hawaiian islands. Kauai was born 5 million years ago. Kauai is old. Maui was born 2 million years ago. As an island, Maui is still young. The greater of the 2 volcanoes that vented Maui is Haleakala, near the southeastern end of the Hawaiian archipelago. Here, the legendary Maui ensnared the sun's rays and held them until he was promised longer days of light and warmth. Thus, Haleakala, meaning the dwelling of the sun. Great discoveries are made in moments, rare moments that linger in the mind forever. To discover Haleakala, you should arrive before dawn. You're in a canopy of clouds, nearly 10,000 feet above sea level, the top of the world. A primordial sun eases its radiance over the earth. Let there be light, revealing, as though for the first time, the bleak beauty of a land made by wind and water and fire. Gazing into its depths, we feel ourselves to be more than mere visitors. We're pilgrims. Indeed, this is a sacred place to the Hawaiians, a vast and holy shrine to creation. This wind-blown crater, 7.5 miles across and 2 miles wide, slopes to a depth of 3,000 feet. Vivid color and shapes grew out of million-year-old tensions between eruption and erosion. This volcano is dormant, but not dead. The last time that Haleakala erupted was in 1790. There are rumors that in a century or two, it may go off again. Haleakala National Park is a refuge for threatened species of plants and birds that are native only to these islands. The rare silver sword, the nene, land-loving goose, and the state bird of Hawaii. Climates are in conflict here. The scorching sun, the torrential rains. One side of Haleakala is comparatively dry. The other side is one of the wettest places on Earth. Here, Haleakala is Eden. Few national parks offer as much variety as this one. Haleakala was once the home of the goddess of the volcanoes, Pele. Polynesian Hawaiians recount Pele's legend in the gestures of a sacred hand dance. The goddess Pele arrived with the first Hawaiians who, relying on their knowledge of the heavens and of the ocean currents, sailed to these islands from Tahiti. Her first dwellings were on Niihau and Kauai. Then she settled in Diamond Head and Oahu. At last she made her home in Haleakala on Maui. Pele, the Great Mother, the ancient mythic vision of this land. Her sister, a goddess of the sea, resented her, hated Pele's fires. There was a terrible battle, to the death. Fire and water. Pele and the goddess of the sea. Pele's body was torn apart. She is dead, thought her sister. But Pele's spirit was still very much alive. She crossed from Maui to the big island of Hawaii with its lively volcanoes. And in Kilauea Crater, she made her home. Here she rules until this day. The island of Hawaii is the most actively volcanic chunk of land on Earth. To discover Pele's domain for yourself is to stand on the rim of the Kilauea caldera. Oval-shaped Kilauea is the collapsed summit of one of the park's 2 active volcanoes. It widens to 2½ miles across, and in some places reaches a depth of 400 feet. Hawaii volcanoes have a distinctive look. They slope gradually, almost gently, from the topmost crater. But that high crater isn't the only site of eruption. Volcanoes also erupt along rift zones. Unlike mainland volcanoes such as Mount St. Helens, which erupted with gaseous explosions, Hawaiian volcanoes erupt with long, fluid lava flows. In classifying different kinds of lava, scientists have adopted terms from the Hawaiian language. Rough, jagged lava is a'a. Lava that's smooth, rope-like, or resembling locks of Pele's hairdo is called pahoehoe. Chemically, both kinds are the same. Science confirms Pele's odyssey from Kauai to Oahu to Maui, and now to Kilauea on the Big Island. It traces intelligently a geologic route from the oldest to the newest of Hawaii's volcanoes. The fiery Pele most certainly destroys anything in her path. As she destroyed the visitor center in Volcanoes National Park in the 1989 eruption. As she renders highways useless. But Pele's fires are the fires of creation as well. Even today, many Hawaiians of various creeds have a healthy respect for her as their ancestors had. It is Pele who blankets Hawaiian beaches with sand as black as pitch. It is Pele who demands a mouthful of the first ohelo, those delicious berries which grow upon the high lava beds. It is Pele who appears to them as Tutu Pele, Grandma Pele, expecting a handout of sacred ava liquor, or whiskey, or gin, for which she has an unquenchable thirst. Then, when attracted to young manly chiefs, she transforms herself into a comely woman who lures her chosen one to her embrace. But contrary to a popular notion fostered by Hollywood adventure flicks, Pele never demanded the sacrifice of lovely maidens to her volcanic maw. It was Pele who kept Kilauea caldera a bubbling lake of lava until 1924. Pele who attracted visitors from around the globe to admire her and to fear her. It was Pele who in 1880 erupted angrily and from Mauna Loa spewed her burning blood toward the town of Hilo, threatening to destroy it. Hawaiians were desperate. They pleaded with Princess Ruth, granddaughter of the great Kamehameha I, to save Hilo. The princess did not hesitate. Despite being 63 years old and weighing 400 pounds, she offered Pele sacred chants, red handkerchiefs for which the goddess has a weakness, and a bottle of brandy. Pele was appeased. The molten lava stopped at the town's edge. In the recent eruption, when lava flows destroyed homes in the Royal Gardens subdivision, Hawaiians said, "This is Pele's land. She let us use it, but now she's taking it back." In the ancient myth of Pele, these people realize they're witness to a process. Ours is a temperamental planet. ever dying and being born, ever tearing down and rebuilding. It's the way of the Earth, but a geologic process that may take thousands of years elsewhere can be grasped in a human lifetime on this island. Here you can see new land being born. Like our primitive ancestors, we stand helpless before a volcano's power. Like Pele, volcanoes seduce us and fill us with awe. Now, we must learn to see them as builders on a cosmic scale, the fiery molds in which our planet is cast, the machinery of creations. For behold, I create new heavens and a new earth.